Welcome to A Year of War and Peace. I'm your host, Brian E. Denton. A Year of War and Peace is a daily, year-long, chapter-by-chapter reading of and meditation on Leo Tolstoy's epic novel, War and Peace. In these videos and podcasts, you'll be treated to a free reading of one chapter per day of the novel, plus a reflective essay I've written individually tailored to that day's chapter. These readings are offered for free, though if you'd like to support me, you can do so in one of three ways. First, you could purchase my ebook, A Year of War and Peace. It features the entire novel, plus all of my reflective essays, and it's only $2.99 on Amazon.com. You could also become a patron at patreon.com/BrianEDenton. If you sign up there, you'll receive a sonnet once a month, plus a link to an ebook of my collected sonnets. Finally, if you like, you can make a one-time donation to my PayPal account. The email there is brianedenton@gmail.com. You can also use that email to contact me. I'd be happy to hear from you. Your support is greatly appreciated. Today's reading and reflection is on Chapter 162. Chapter 162. Pierre drove to Maria Dmitrievna's to tell her of the fulfillment of her wish that Kuragin should be banished from Moscow. The whole house was in a state of alarm and commotion. Natasha was very ill, having, as Maria Dmitrievna told him in secret, poisoned herself the night after she had been told that Anatoly was married, with some arsenic she had stealthily procured. After swallowing a little, she had been so frightened that she woke Sonia and told her what she had done. The necessary antidotes had been administered in time, and she was now out of danger, though still so weak that it was out of the question to move her to the country. And so the Countess had been sent for. Pierre saw the distracted Count, and Sonia, who had a tear-stained face, but he could not see Natasha. Pierre dined at the club that day and heard on all sides gossip about the attempted abduction of Rostova. He resolutely denied these rumors, assuring everyone that nothing had happened except that his brother-in-law had proposed to her and been refused. It seemed to Pierre that it was his duty to conceal the whole affair and re-establish Natasha's reputation. He was awaiting Prince Andrew's return with dread, and went every day to the old prince's for news of him. Old Prince Bolkonsky heard all the rumors current in the town from Mademoiselle Bourienne, and had read the note to Princess Mary, in which Natasha had broken off her engagement. He seemed in better spirits than usual, and awaited his son with great impatience. What a dickhead. Some days after Anatoly's departure, Pierre received a note from Prince Andrew, informing him of his arrival, and asking him to come see him. As soon as he reached Moscow, Prince Andrew had received from his father Natasha's note to Princess Mary breaking off her engagement. Mademoiselle Bourienne had purloined it from Princess Mary and given it to the old prince, and he heard from him the story of Natasha's elopement, with additions. Prince Andrew had arrived in the evening, and Pierre came to see him the next morning. Pierre expected to find Prince Andrew in almost the same state as Natasha, and was therefore surprised on entering the drawing room to hear him in the study talking in a loud, animated voice about some intrigue going on in Petersburg. The old prince's voice and another now and then interrupted him. Princess Mary came out to meet Pierre. She sighed, looking toward the door of the room where Prince Andrew was, evidently intending to express her sympathy with his sorrow, but Pierre saw by her face that she was glad both at what had happened and at the way her brother had taken the news of Natasha's faithlessness. "He says he expected it," she remarked. "I know his pride will not let him express his feelings, but still he has taken it better, far better, than I expected. Evidently it has to be." "But is it possible that all is really ended?" asked Pierre. Princess Mary looked at him with astonishment. She did not understand how he could ask such a question. Pierre went into the study. Prince Andrew, greatly changed and plainly in better health, but with the fresh horizontal wrinkle between his brows, stood in civilian dress facing his father and Prince Meshchersky, warmly disputing and vigorously gesticulating. The conversation was about Speransky, the news of whose sudden exile and alleged treachery had just reached Moscow. "Now he is censored and accused by all who were enthusiastic about him a month ago," Prince Andrew was saying, "and by those who were unable to understand his aims. To judge a man who is in disfavor and to throw him all the blame of other men's mistakes is very easy, but I maintain that if anything good has been accomplished in his reign, it was done by him, and him alone." He paused at the sight of Pierre. His face quivered and immediately assumed a vindictive expression. "Posterity will do him justice," he concluded, and at once turned to Pierre. "Well, how are you? Still getting stouter?" he said with animation, but the new wrinkle on his forehead deepened. "Yes, I am well," he said in answer to Pierre's question, and smiled. To Pierre, that smile said plainly, "I am well, but my health is now of no use to anyone." After a few words to Pierre about the awful roads from the Polish frontier, about people he had met in Switzerland who knew Pierre, and about Monsieur de Sales, whom he had brought from abroad to be his son's tutor, Prince Andrew again joined warmly in the conversation about Speransky, which was still going on between the two old men. If there were treason or proofs of secret relations with Napoleon, that would have been made public, he said with warmth and haste. "I do not and never did like Speransky personally, but I do like justice." Pierre now recognized in his friend a need with which he was only too familiar, to get excited in order to stifle the thoughts that were too oppressive and too intimate. When Prince Mershchevsky had left, Prince Andrew took Pierre's arm and asked him into the room that had been assigned to him. A bed had been made up there, and some portmanteaus and trunks stood about. Prince Andrew went to one and took out a small casket, from which he drew a packet wrapped in paper. He did it all silently and very quickly. He stood up and coughed. His face was gloomy, and his lips compressed. "Forgive me for troubling you." Pierre saw that Prince Andrew was going to speak of Natasha, and his broad face expressed pity and sympathy. This expression irritated Prince Andrew, and in a determined, ringing, and unpleasant tone, he continued, "I have received a refusal from Countess Rostova, and have heard reports of your brother-in-law having sought her hand, or something of that kind. Is that true?" "Both true and untrue," Pierre began. But Prince Andrew interrupted him. "Here are her letters and her portrait," said he. He took the packet from the table and handed it to Pierre. "Give this to the Countess, if you see her." "She is very ill," said Pierre. "Then she is still here," said Prince Andrew. "And Prince Karágin?" he added quickly. "He left long ago. She's been at death's door." "I much regret her illness," said Prince Andrew, and he smiled, like his father, coldly, maliciously, and unpleasantly. "So, Monsieur Karágin has not honored Countess Rostova with his hand," said Prince Andrew, and he snorted several times. "He could not marry, for he was married already," said Pierre. Prince Andrew laughed disagreeably, again reminding one of his father. "And where is your brother-in-law now, if I may ask?" he said. "He's gone to Peter's, but I don't know," said Pierre. "Well, it doesn't matter," said Prince Andrew. "Tell Countess Rostova that she was and is perfectly free, and that I wish her all that is good." Pierre took the packet. Prince Andrew, as if trying to remember whether he had something more to say, or waiting to see if Pierre would say anything, looked fixedly at him. "I say, do you remember our discussion in Petersburg?" asked Pierre. "About—" "Yes," returned Prince Andrew hastily. "I said that a fallen woman should be forgiven, but I didn't say I could forgive her. I can't." "But can this be compared?" said Pierre. Prince Andrew interrupted him, and cried sharply, "Yes! Ask her hand again, be magnanimous, and so on? Yes, that would be very noble, but I am unable to follow in that gentleman's footsteps. If you wish to be my friend, never speak to me of that, of all that. Well, goodbye. So you'll give her the packet?" Pierre left the room and went to the old prince and Princess Mary. The old man seemed livelier than usual. Princess Mary was the same as always, but beneath her sympathy for her brother, Pierre noticed her satisfaction that the engagement had been broken off. Looking at them, Pierre realized what contempt and animosity they all felt for the Rostovs, and that it was impossible in their presence even to mention the name of her who would give up Prince Andrew for anyone else. At dinner, the talk turned on the war, the approach of which was becoming evident. Prince Andrew talked incessantly, arguing now with his father, now with the Swiss tutor, and showing an unnatural animation, the cause of which Pierre so well understood. All right, that concludes my reading of chapter 162. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll now proceed to my reflection on the same. A Year of War and Peace, day 162. Birthday. My birthday falls on the 162nd day of the year. That's today in A Year of War and Peace if you're reading on the calendar year. So, despite there being any number of worthy reflections and meditations found in today's chapter, I'd like to indulge myself just a little bit and focus on one particular philosophical practice that I need to work on the most. It just so happens, by happy coincidence, that the character who most needs the same practice is my favorite character from back when I first read War and Peace so many years ago. That character is Prince Andrew Bolkonsky, and the philosophical practice we both need to work on is making sure our actions match our words. Prince Andrew has returned to Russia. It's quite a scene he's re-entered. Rumors of his fiancée swirl about town. These rumors are partially confirmed by the letter Natasha wrote to him. Natasha herself has attempted suicide and lays ill and immobile across town. The villain of the story, Anatoly Kuragin, is the brother-in-law of his best friend Pierre. You'd think Andrew would be devastated, but he's not. At least that is, he doesn't appear to be. Bolkonsky's recall are ice cold. When Pierre visits him, he finds Prince Andrew to be loud and animated in his discussion with his family. He even looks healthy and rejuvenated from his travels. Andrew concludes his happy conversation with his family and takes Pierre aside into his room to discuss private matters in a decidedly more somber tone. He asks Pierre if the rumors of the elopement are true. Pierre answers honestly, and Andrew, not wishing to hear any more on the subject, provides Pierre with a package of Natasha's belongings to be returned to her. It's during this conversation that Pierre notices something is off with Andrew. He might not be as content as he's pretending to be. Pierre now recognized in his friend, Tolstoy writes, a need with which he was only too familiar, to get excited and have arguments about extraneous matters in order to stifle the thoughts that were too oppressive and too intimate. Before the two friends return to the main room to have dinner, Pierre asks if the marriage will be called off. Andrew answers in the affirmative. But Pierre asked, what about Andrew's former talk of forgiveness? I said that a fallen woman should be forgiven, Prince Andrew replies, but I didn't say that I could forgive her. I can't. The bad news is that Prince Andrew is falling into the trap, familiar to all of us, of abandoning his principles during a time of hardship. The good news is that there is still time to make amends. Daily meditation. Prove your words by deeds. This, I say, is the highest duty and the highest proof of wisdom, that deed and word should be in accord, that a man should be equal to himself under all conditions, and always the same. Seneca, Letter on Practicing What You Preach. All right, that concludes my reading of and reflection on chapter 162. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks so much for joining me. Remember that if you'd like to support me, you can do so either by purchasing the ebook A Year of War and Peace, becoming a patron at patreon.com, or making a one-time donation to PayPal. Links to all that are down below in the show notes. Tomorrow we're going to be reading and reflecting on chapter 163. I hope you'll join me. Until then, take care of yourselves and others.